Materials supplied by Microsoft Corporation may be used for internal review, analysis, or research only. Any editing, reproduction, publication, rebroadcast, public showing, internet, or public display is forbidden and may violate copyright law.
Thanks, Haibo. So if the first demo about cities was about integrating all kinds of different data, I think Cosmos is all about massive scale. As Haibo mentioned, the system is tens of thousands of servers, close to an exabyte of data, and thousands of jobs running every day. And it's just a massive system that is a tremendous asset inside the company. So the third demo that I would like to show you is around Power BI, and I'm going to invite Sinead O'Donovan, who is the leader of the program management team for this team. And this is also partly built here in China and really showcases how an end user, we're really empowering end users to slice and dice data in new ways. To show you that, Sinead. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Prakash. So I want to, when we talk to customers about their data, they always talk about the struggle they have with the velocity, the volume, and the variety. And for them, data is really a key part of their business. In fact, I was in an EBC with Delta Airlines, and they talked about, in the flight business and the struggle how they compete for the price for a seat. They just cannot compete anymore on the price of a seat in a flight. However, how they can compete is how they run their business and how quickly they can make decisions that impact their business, because that really will impact their COGS. And they gave examples like knowing when a storm is coming and how do they plan for that. And once the storm has hit, how do they reposition crews and airplanes so that they can recover quickly? How do they make decisions on what price to hedge their fuel costs on? These are all really key decisions that they want to make with the data, and that data to drive that decision comes from a variety of places, some from within the company and then some from outside. And so they're just kind of, and similarly with banks, they're looking at how do I loan this money to this small business? And they're looking at, well, how do I determine whether that business will survive? And they've learned that one of the key indicators for them is actually if they track the packages coming to and from via UPS, they can have a better indicator of whether that business is healthy or not. And so if they buy and use the data from UPS, they can make a decision, a bank is making a decision on whether to loan money or not. And so as we look at sort of those the new possibilities that both the cloud and the accessibility of the data and the speed at which we can go from data to insight, that is really the framework that drove our investment in a new offering from Microsoft called Power BI. So what is Power BI? Power BI has sort of two sides of the solution. The first one is looking at using Excel as the key tool of how you might drive insight, how you might visualize the data, how you might draw decisions from. And then another key part is how do you actually share those insights? How do you collaborate with others? We're using SharePoint Online in particular, part of Office 365. And at Microsoft, we have these two incredible assets. Office itself is used by more than 1 billion people, and Office 365 has had such phenomenal growth. 1 in 4 enterprises now are an Office 365 subscriber. And so as we built our Power BI solution, we extend that by looking at new ways to visualize and discover data, and then share and collaborate and access that data. So with that in mind, I'm going to show you, I will start this by saying I am not a scientist, but for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to pretend to be one. And I have a hypothesis, and please don't critique my scientific abilities here. I have a hypothesis that maybe obesity, if we look at worldwide obesity, that it's strongly correlated with GDP. And I'm going to extrapolate and say, if as countries GDP grows, do they get fatter and bigger, or is that an actual correct hypothesis or not? And so with that in mind, I'm going to So just real quickly, Office Power BI for Office 365 here is in preview. You can sign up for it right now and do a search on Power BI for Office 365 and you can learn more about it. So let me go ahead and pretend to be that scientist. What I did before this, I went out and I did some searching using Bing, and I found that actually the WHO, the World Health Organization, has actually some really good data on obesity, and I found that you can see here on this webpage that they have pretty good data about in each country what is the prevalence of obesity. You can also see a heat map. I also found that if we want to look for GDP data, I found that Hans Rosling and gapminder.org has also got some really good data on GDP, population size, and growth. So I found these. I went ahead and I downloaded some of this data to my laptop in case the network connection is bad, but I'm going to try and do as much of this demo as possible live. So I'm going to go into Excel, which would be the primary experience for most users. And you will see in Excel that there's some new tabs here, and these are the extensions for Power BI. So you can see this tab called Power Query. So the very first thing I'm going to do, Power Query is a really useful tool for getting data from different sources and merging them together and doing some transformations on that data as it comes in. So the very first data I'm going to do is I've actually downloaded the obesity data from the WHO website, and I'm going to actually open that data. So I'm going to open it. It's a CSV file, and you'll see here I downloaded, and this is the file. Now, what happens here is it's going to open the file, and you'll see that the data is actually quite raw. It went ahead here and it shows all the data. Now I want to do some simple cleanup of this data, and this is a wonderful thing that Power Query has done. Is you can see that actually the first row, I'm just going to make the first row a header. I actually don't need a lot of these columns here. I just need the country and I need the obesity percentage, so I can just right-click, remove those columns. I'm now going to do some more cleanup on this data because I don't need the rest of it, but I do need the value. So I'm going to remove these columns. So I see the year. Actually, I don't even need the year. I'm going to remove this. And then the data value, oh, this is actually the obesity. So I'm going to rename that so I don't get confused. Obesity percent. Remove these columns. And what I'm doing now is cleaning up the data. Now, what's really nice about Power Query is everything that I did is captured in these repeatable steps. You can see if I started with a source. First row was a header. I then removed some columns. I renamed some columns, and then I removed some more columns. And so here's now the data. I think it's pretty good. I'm going to call this one. I can rename this query now. This is obesity percentage, and then I can say I'm done. Now it's going to head and it's going to process, going to land the data in Excel so I can start to do some interesting things with this data. So we'll just give it a second here as it processes it. And you can see now the data is all cleaned up and it has saved this model. So if I was to come back later and refresh it, it will pick up the latest data. So another interesting way that I could have put the data in this is I could actually have taken it directly from the website. And so that's another new capability. So if we go out here in the World Health Organization, I'm just going to copy this URL. And you'll see this web page is actually a pretty rich web page. It has a lot of information. But what I really want is this table. And that's actually possible now with Power BI too. Very easily, I just copy the web page. I hit OK. You can see it's looking here at WHO, the WHO organization, and it's going to bring in the data and it's going to scrape that website and going to build a table directly from that web page. So we'll give it a second here. So one of the things we really wanted to do is realize that data comes from everywhere, and it's actually how you merge and mash up the data is where the insight will come from. Now my hope is that we can see this. We'll give it a few seconds here. One of the beauties of live demos. Okay, here's the data, and you can see how it's actually scraped it, and it's actually pulled up the data from that table right from the website and actually part it. And just like before, I can do some really simple cleanups of this data and actually get the exact same data directly from the website. And again, when I refresh it, I can get the data. Since I already have that, I'm not going to use that one, but I'm going to discard it. Now, another place I'm going to show you where we can actually do pretty complicated transformations on the data is I downloaded an Excel workbook from that Gapminder site, and it had GDP data. And so let me open that up. Now, this data is in a form where I think a lot of scientists, how they store their data. And you can see, again, I have let me maximize this so you can see it a little better. You can see here I have all the years where we have BMI data by country. So again, I'm going to do some just very simple, see how easy this is. That's the first row. I actually am only interested in the last 30 years for my nice report, so I'm just going to easily delete those columns. I'm going to remove those. This is actually pretty difficult to chart it in this format because it's already been pivoted. So with very simple clicks, I can unpivot the data. I'm going to select all of the columns, and then I'm going to right-click, and then I can unpivot the data. And you can see now it's made a row for each data, so it'll make it much easier for me to merge. So this is the year, just so I don't get confused at what values are. This is BMI. Oh no, this is GDP, sorry, per capita. Let me do that, GDP per capita. And then this is the country. I'm going to merge this. I'm going to give the name to this query, GDP per capita. And I'm now done. Give it a second as it transforms. One of the things that Power Query does too is it doesn't load all the data. In fact, these tools are built for millions of rows of data. New in Excel 2013 is this new data model, and they've specifically put focus on making sure we can support data that's larger than 2 million rows of data. And so that's another kind of key part. So as you're doing the model, it only loads in the first set of data so you can start doing some of the transformations and models. And then when you hit done, then it's going to actually go ahead and start processing the data. So it's pulling this in now. Let's give it a second to complete. And now I'm going to merge those two data sources. Remember, I got one from the CSV file. I got another one from an Excel workbook. Now I want to put them together so that I can create a nice, interesting report. Sorry, that was my fault. User error, I didn't hit done. So I have now done that. Now I'm going to merge those two reports, and I'll just show you how easy that is. So here I'm in Power Query. I'm going to hit this button here called Merge. I'm going to say, okay, I have GDP per capita, and then I have another table, which is the obesity percentage. I know that the unique key is I want to do it by country, and then I hit OK. And now it's done that. It's merged those two together. And I don't need the country name. I just need the obesity percentage. I'm just going to expand that table. And now, just with a few clicks, I've now got these two tables merged together. And I'm going to hit done. And now that data was all merged. You notice one table had years, another table didn't have years, and it was all very easily merged, very, very simply. Now, another option for me to find data is, instead of me doing all that work of finding the population, the GDP, the obesity, is I could have actually done a search within my organization and see if anybody else had done this work before, and maybe there already is a model that exists. And if there is, maybe I could use that and have avoided all that work that I just did. So let me just go ahead and see if anybody, I'm signed into the Microsoft Office 365 tenant right now, and we have this new feature called Online Search. And actually this, I'm going to show you one thing just to tie in Prakesh's. One thing that we do here is we have data that we've included from the public, so that could be from data.gov or Wikipedia, and we've also included data from the Azure Marketplace, and then we also include data from your corporation. So for example, if we were to look at list of cities in China, for example, as an example of a search, when we look at the Smart City Initiative, we could actually see, is there any data out there to find the top cities? And let me go ahead here and search for a second. And then we'll do a search on the data. And come on, work for me. Go ahead and hit search. Okay, so now it's going to do a search, and we'll see what it can find. It'll search across the public data that we've indexed as well as the Azure. And you can see here, oh, there is data actually here. One of the nice things I can do is I can mouse over it, and you can see a preview of what that data is and where did it come from. So this is a list of cities in America, and I can see this came from an internal Microsoft employee because you can see the email down here. But you will see that there's an icon. In some cases, it'll say, where did it come from? Some places it'll show a W if it's from Wikipedia. But let me go back to BMI, which is what I will see if anybody within Microsoft has done another model that I could use instead of all the extra work I did there for that 5 minutes. And I do find that somebody has actually done a model already. And let me see if I can see it. Oh, and they did exactly. They have BMI, GDP, and population by country and year. I was like, okay, that would have actually saved me that time. So now I'm going to actually use their model. Instead, and what the Power Query will do is when we share, you can share up your model to SharePoint Online as the Power BI site, and then other users within the org can use that model. And the data, it'll preserve the relationship to the data, and it'll actually refresh the data as the new user. The data isn't stored, just the model. So I'm pulling that in. You can see that it's processing now. You'll probably see that it's going out to each of the sources to pull that data in. So this may take a little bit of time. So what I might do is let me do that in the cooking program. Something. Let me go to the kitchen. I have one in the oven, so let me go pull that one out for a second. So I have already got. I'm going to bring up this one, and I'm just going to show you now how you might visualize that data. So here's a book that I already, now very easily in Excel, I can go insert, and I can do a Power View, create a new Power View, map. I need to enable, sorry, I should enable the content. Oh. Okay, well, I have a report already built, and I am just going to show you here, using the data, that exact same table, I created a report, very, very easily, and it just looks at BMI by country. And one of the nice things that it has is this play that you can look at over time, how did the data change. So we can now test my hypothesis. As GDP is here on the x-axis, and BMI is on the right, and we can say over time, as GDP grew for a country, did they in fact get fatter or not? And so let me go ahead and play the data. And so we can see, and it is pretty interesting to see the data move. You do see that countries are in general, a set of countries are getting wealthier. However, some got fatter and some did not. And let me just point out, if we take a look at the United States as an example, and we can see a clear graph that as their BMI, as GDP has grown over the last 30 years, they have indeed, obesity has risen. But there are places where that's not true. And so if we want to replay, if we take a look at Japan as another example, let me replay the model and see what happens with Japan. So you can see Japan is down here. They have indeed gotten richer, but they have not increased and gotten fatter. So here's some very new insights that we can draw from the report. So with that in mind, I'm going to switch back to Prakash to here. So I want to just share with you, so what you saw here today, real briefly, I spent a lot of time on Power Query, is how we can actually bring data in, clean up the data, merge data together. I didn't show you Power Pivot. This is more advanced capabilities where you can actually do intricate data modeling of the data. And then I showed you Power View, how you can create a very, very simple report and look at and visualize the data. Then there's a set of other capabilities too that if we had more time, I would encourage you to go out and try the preview, Q&A, share the models. We did see that. And behind the scenes, this is actually a pretty intricate system to bring all of this data together. Oops. So As you can see, we have stuff coming in from Windows Azure because we have data in the marketplace. Internal data, we're indexing the company data and the models that users have created. And we've got this index. And we then have IT controls of how they can set up and operationalize very popular models and workbooks. And then the information worker can discover what other people within the organization have done and then build and extend those models and find new data sources and build new mashups. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Prakash.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks. So that was a quick example. Those of you who've seen Hans Rosling and his videos, you might go search on YouTube or somewhere. Now, all of you can be Hans Rosling and do these types of demos really easily right there in Excel. So just to summarize, what we've seen, the modern data-driven applications have a number of key characteristics or requirements. They need to process and handle a variety of data, from words and numbers to images, voice, video, spatial, sensor data, web logs, massive volume, petabytes coming up on exabytes of data, terabytes of hour, tens of terabytes of data per hour to process. Mashing public data with private data, that's very important to be able to derive insights. And also being able to process data in real time, in a batch way for historical analytics, and also in a predictive way, applying machine learning and those type of algorithms. So a modern data platform for data-driven applications needs to provide all these capabilities. And really quickly, Microsoft provides a pretty comprehensive platform for these capabilities. Based on a variety of different products, it's not one product that makes up the Microsoft data platform. It's really a infrastructure layer that's based on either on your own premises, based on Windows Server, or on our public cloud, which is called Windows Azure. And Dennis Gannon will have a whole session on Windows Azure for research. And then SQL Server, which is the brand for our data platform, but really encompasses a variety of technologies from relational to non-relational or Hadoop to OLAP to streaming data and others. And then integrated with the most broadly used information worker tool set, which is Office and Excel. So that's really the entirety of the Microsoft Data Platform. If you were like CERN in the morning talk and you had a budget of $1 billion a year, roughly, you could build all this on your own. If you're not, then you could use a platform that a commercial vendor provides. So just to give you a sense of the level of investment, Windows Azure, it's our public cloud service. It's a worldwide service. It has data centers in North America, in Europe, in Asia, here in Hong Kong, Singapore. We are putting up more data centers in Japan, Australia, and also right here in China. And we're actually the first multinational to announce our public cloud service in China. Provides a variety of services from compute of various kinds, virtual machines, of course, not only Windows virtual machines, but Linux virtual machines, to storage, SQL storage, full-fledged database capabilities, also blob storage, table storage, as well as networking, virtual networking, so you can connect your private environment to the public cloud environment. And not only those basic capabilities, compute, storage, networking, but also higher level capabilities like easily be able to build websites, to be able to do streaming media applications, to be able to build mobile applications, all of those type of capabilities. And finally, with the open programming environment, this is something that most people do not realize, but Windows Azure not only supports the Microsoft programming languages and frameworks around .NET, C#, but also Java, PHP, Node.js, Python, any language that you want to bring, integration with GitHub, all of those are part of Windows Azure. It's really a comprehensive public cloud platform. Another question I know a lot of people have in mind is, what about Hadoop? And as I mentioned on the previous slide, we are actually providing a version of Hadoop on our platform. It's called HD Insight. It's built collaboratively with Hortonworks, which is one of the entities that has a public distribution of Hadoop. And it really brings together the best of the open source Hadoop world with the best of the Microsoft world in terms of the programming language and model that being compatible, 100% compatible with what's out there in the public domain, but with the enterprise class security, manageability, high availability that comes with the Microsoft platform and also built into Windows Azure so that you can provision a Hadoop cluster, which is one of the most difficult things to do as a user, you can literally provision that with a few clicks in about 10 minutes. And that's amazing capability. And you'll hear more about our HD Insight offering in the next couple of weeks. We're actually even going beyond that. I don't have a whole lot of time to cover this, but we're thinking about how to integrate the Hadoop world with the more traditional relational world so that you can have a system that spans the two, and you can define schemas that span the two, you can define queries that span the two, and we can intelligently parse those queries, figure out what needs to be solved by the Hadoop part of the system, what needs to be solved by the relational part of the system, run all that machinery, bring the results together, and present it to you in a very easy-to-use form. So that's something you will hear more about in the future as well. And then the last thing I want to touch on is the Windows Azure Marketplace for data, which, as Sinead mentioned and showed, it's really important to be able to have a library of data sets that you can call upon that are provided by third parties, because you might not have all the data you need in order to do the analysis. So we have actually a marketplace for data and data providers on Azure. It's called datamarket.azure.com. You can go there, you can browse all the existing data sets. If you have a data set that you want to provide, you can provide it on there either for free or for a fee. And you can have different business models, how you want to charge for it on a subscription basis, on a per-use basis. And we have a number of data sets actually from across the world and across different domains, whether it's population data, UN data, weather data, finance data, legal data, all kinds of providers on there in that marketplace. So that's, I think, key part of the modern data platform. So really to summarize, I think we're in now a new world with this data explosion, data coming from devices, sensors, mobile, social networks, and really also a new class of data-driven applications that are being built, and you saw some examples of that. In fact, I tend to think data is the new currency. Data is really the gold that people are trying to mine when they're building these type of applications. But to build these type of data-driven applications requires, as you saw, fairly complex machinery to be able to handle different kinds of data, the scale, the volumes, the rate of data, and to be able to do rich analytics and derive insights. And as you saw, Microsoft provides actually a pretty comprehensive platform. For those of you who are not familiar with that platform, I really encourage you to go take a look. There are a number of resources out there if you want to learn more about Windows Azure or the big data on Microsoft, Power BI that Sinead showed, Azure for Academic. As I mentioned, Dennis has a whole session on that, and he will cover a lot more about that, as well as all the e-science efforts at Microsoft Research. So with that, come to the end of this session. If we have a few minutes, we can take a couple of questions. Or if not, we should. Any questions?